Hello there. Streaming, coming to you live. And I hope to talk today a bit about AI. And hopefully we will cover a little bit about what the future entails, the future of work, what is productivity, what should we even be trying to do. Can you boil work down to some core essential feature? And I think we can. I think that essential feature is entropy. But let me fix my monitor here off screen a little bit. How are things in Twitch world? This is my first stream. Now I'm totally in the dark. Let's see if I can make this a little brighter. How about now? Okay. You can see that. Let me go turn a light on. Is that better? A little bit? Not really. Okay. Bear with. So I'm going to talk about entropy. There's entropy in the physical world, and there's entropy in the information world. One is computer science, mostly. Although that wasn't something that existed when entropy was adapted to the information world, but the original entropy definition is the second law of thermodynamics. The first law that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And when von Neumann and Claude Shannon were working at AT&T, and Claude Shannon was developing entropy as an equation, von Neumann said, this looks like the second law of thermodynamics. So call it entropy. And in the world of information, entropy is uncertainty. In the physical world, entropy is disorder, and it has a specific definition with a specific equation and specific, maybe even molecular states or thermal states when it comes to the world of very scientific measurement, right? Oh, is this a comment? Cheap followers on stream.com. Looks like spam. You know? Anyway, first stream. But, yeah. So von Neumann, the computer is the von Neumann architecture. And we have the bit because of Shannon. What this measures is the amount of bits in information, the amount of entropy and uncertainty. And information in today's information age and distraction, attention economy, we don't even know what information is or who we're supposed to be or what's real. And same really goes for computer science, as it's said that anything with the word science after it is not really a science. Because with a computer, you can just make programs all day and get the computer to do an endless loop of games and food delivery apps and other gig apps and spyware, malware, things that are clout disguised as clout when they're really spyware. But what's really true, what is beyond the simulation, even if it is a simulation, what's the hard rule of the simulation, of the nonsense? And in any way you want to understand that word simulation from the Elon Musk popular theory of a simulation, or in terms of Baudrillard with the simulacra and the simulation, and how the world is fake and we're all screens that simulation is projected to us and we project out, and kind of the whole media apparatus, which we'll talk about because they're very confused about AI, just about as confused and scared as you are, but you have the agency. And we'll talk about this later, this program here, which I hope is a good co-pilot, but I've jumped across 3 different topics here. But let's talk about entropy and the von Neumann architecture, the bits. There's nothing in the world of computers, computer science, that can ever contradict this law of entropy. So information is the amount of bits with this equation that resolves the uncertainty. And we're used to hearing about information in all sorts of ways for all sorts of reasons. Endless information for ego stroking, for who you are and who you're supposed to be, information from the watch, sensors everywhere, notifications, of course, information, a lot of distractions, a lot of analysis paralysis, which is fine. Do whatever you want, but information in terms of bits, information, key insight from Shannon was that information is what resolves uncertainty. And you can measure the specific amount of information to resolve uncertainty, and maybe best applied with probability. If you have a coin that's a fair coin and you flip the coin, the amount of uncertainty, you can figure it out here. I don't remember where to plug in the fair coin situation into this. But you can measure the amount of entropy, the amount of surprise, and the amount of information you will need to resolve the uncertainty, whether it's heads or tails, and the likeliness of heads or tails. So you have an equal amount of surprise in a fair coin. So that's an increase in randomness. More randomness is more uncertainty. And that's with a fair coin. If the coin is bent and more likely to land on one side, let's say it's concaved more, on the tails side, when it's bowl shaped, it's like the tails is in that bowl. Bentness of the coin, depending how bent it is, you could figure it out from doing 100 or 1,000 trials and see how often, more often, it's landing because of its unfair shape. You're getting less surprise, so less randomness that it is landing on tails. So because there's less surprise, less randomness, there's less uncertainty, there's less entropy. So because there's less entropy, you need less information. So information is, in this way, a symptom of disorder. And that's an interesting point. I'm not just taking science and laws of physics and applying them to life, because this was mapped out in another area by Martin Heidegger, who talked about the ready at hand and the present to hand, where something is working. If it's working, the better it works, the more it's just a continuation of your own being, your own body. It's like the tennis racket becomes a part. If you're shifting gears and pressing pedals and turning the wheel. You don't even have to think about doing any of that. It's like one big connection. So there's less information. There's less information. Not only do you have less and less uncertainty, the better you are, the more familiar you are with the situation. So stuntmen, stunt drivers have less uncertainty than there would be about what's going to happen than the crew or the actors who might not be able to do stunts in most situations. So containing randomness, that's information. That's another way of thinking about information, a roundabout way. So I will get to a point, maybe tie it all together. Maybe this would be interesting as a stream, and what you're supposed to do in this age now that the roles have been getting stripped. I know for Gen X, they were not as happy about the situation as the boomers, the economy, the information age, the millennials, forget about it, totally lost. And then the Zoomers, maybe some are graduating now and seeing the uncertainty and the confusion, and people really even going back to a wanting a primitive life, wanting to just give it all, put it all back, having no part in it in this economy. And we'll talk about the reasons, and it has to do with entropy and disorder and uncertainty. But getting back to this coin, you could go even farther with the unfair coin and having more certainty. Of course, you'd want things to be fair if it's a good enough game, but you have randomness. I guess that's why people gamble. They don't understand that gambling is random, usually not in their favor. But the entropy is the measurement of information. The information resolves uncertainty. And then if the coin is a trick coin, tails on both sides. If you flip the coin, you don't need any information because you don't have any uncertainty of whether the coin is heads or tails. So information is a symptom of disorder, and it is connected to the other definition of entropy that we have from the second law of thermodynamics of the physical world. And like I said before, that's a very specific understanding that let me change the title here, ambient AI, and I'm just going to change the title. Okay. Change that. So like I was saying, the disorder of the second law of thermodynamics and understanding it, and really understanding that disorder and uncertainty, the similarity, and then we'll talk about the human being, the human animal. But the disorder of the physical world, which there's a molecular state, microscopic observations that the second law of thermodynamics and the equation are applied to. So I'm using it metaphorically, and I'll join both of these definitions together. Using it metaphorically, look around you, whatever room you're in, all of the objects in that room, the number of ways that you could configure all of the things in the room. There's a higher number of configurations where the condition, the state of that room, if a stranger was to walk in and see it, where it would be in a state of disorder. So there are more disordered possible configurations, more possible disordered states than there are ordered. Or how could you improve a clean room, a clean, orderly room? You might be able to bring in someone who's good at feng shui, an architect, somebody, if you had the means, the energy to increase function and form and beauty. It's always a smaller and smaller subset of possible actions, of possible courses of actions and configurations to add, to improve, and that's reducing the entropy, reducing it. And it's a bit like if you've seen an asymptote in calculus. You're kind of in a situation where you're adding more and more effort, more and more energy, more and more exploration, but you're reaching a limit. And we definitely did reach a limit. We definitely were reaching a limit before AI. Things were really getting crazy and are still crazy. In terms of how we're supposed to live, in terms of what we're supposed to do with all of this information, I think meeting each other, there's a kind of dread, not only the dread because we've all become shut-ins, and there's a special kind of comfort to being a shut-in and not having to interact with possible crazy people. It's not just the crazy people, but it's also the disciplined people who have entrenched themselves into the beliefs, not only the main two beliefs. I don't have to say what they are, you know what they are, but then the understandings, the kind of subcults within the major cults. And I think not only encountering that and then encountering someone who has bumper stickers on their car, who doesn't even have a personality, but has that kind of overarching understanding of the world, because we don't have one. It's like the worse it is, the worse it is. The less we have a understanding, common, what would you call it, code to live by, Jordan Peterson, 7 rules. We're not all following those 7 rules or 10 rules or whatever that is. So forget about that. We're not doing that. And it's kind of a problem. The worse it gets, the worse it gets. And even you, not only with other people, but you can feel yourself pulled in and see in times when you've been pulled in to a situation where it's just getting caught in a loop. This one thing is significant because the next thing is significant, because the next thing is significant. And when you go around in that loop, when you've been caught in that loop of chains of significance, you kind of realize that it's doing nothing to reduce the uncertainty and the disorder. It's bringing no order, nothing novel, nothing interesting, no certainty to your life. And you're kind of just like in the whirlpool. So if we were in ancient Greek times, there'd be something like heroes, and did they call them cowards or people who were not heroes? And then you had sinners and saints. So at least everybody agreed, as they say. Everybody knew the rules and everybody stayed in line. Everybody knew if you got out of line, you got whacked, as they said. And maybe that's why mob movies and this kind of life have that kind of appeal, where everybody knows the rules, everybody gets what they deserve. People are really not even getting what they deserve, good or bad. I think you see it maybe in your workplace. And what's really bad, not only we have Hollywood, we have PR, we have advertising, we have companies that are kind of desperate, it's not just that we have the few monopolies that no one can compete with. It's that if you're in a company that's making a good enough wage, or there is a TV channel that's just trying to do something modestly good, it tends to sell out and do reality TV, or a company tends to do unethical things to extract, to churn and burn their employees and their customers, and then buy back stock, then have a golden parachute and do, how many things could I list? Like the gutting of America's industrial sector, offshoring, bringing people in. A modest gain is not enough, which we'll talk about the money. A lot of it has to do with the money, the stage that we're in with the money. That's important, and I can explain it briefly, but vulture capitalists, people like, what's his name? I want to give, speaking of giving people credit, not only Mitt Romney, who goes to companies and borrows money, and then they are more valuable to be destroyed than they are to this town and to the modest profit they're making. But it's basically because they can't beat the real inflation rate that they end up getting sold for scrap and replaced by companies all over the world. Maybe that's just technology. Maybe that's a lot of that is people not getting in where they fit in and applying entropy, which we'll talk about. Can't remember his name. That's not him. That's not him. This guy, Paul Singer, is another one. Not really important. It's just there, that incentive exists to really manipulate and really extract, and the media is doing it. This is not this does not reduce entropy. The job of humans is to reduce entropy. But we're going to talk about what a human is and why I'm applying these rules of entropy to the human being, but missing the point. But increasing the entropy, that's bad. We should be reducing entropy, but it's always a smaller and smaller subset. But let's get back to the asymptote. The asymptote gets closer and closer. Like this is 0 here, and this function is getting closer and closer to 0. Never touches it, but it's like the room is a mess here. The room is totally destroyed. The house is destroyed. It's been flooded, hit by a tornado, burned. Tear down the house, build a new house, keep building, keep increasing, keep improving, get a better and better architecture. Get rid of that architect, get a new design. Get rid of that craftsman, get a better craftsman. Make it cleaner, create an addition, take that down, make that better, better. It's always a smaller and smaller subset of better and better and better. So it's not rock and roll and randomness and be an animal. The goal is to reduce entropy. So that takes energy. There's a cost. There's a cost to tear the house down and put in a new house. There's a cost to hire a decorator and have in better furniture. But we'll talk about the money and why the economy is in the state it's in before we get to AI. But the gold has a unique property. I know that people don't like gold because the rich people have gold and they don't have gold and they can't use gold. But the gold has been the money for longer than 3,000 years. But for the past 3,000 years, it was literally state-sanctioned money. So the way it would start was the people were just using gold. People would trade. When people traded, they traded what they had to offer with what somebody else had to offer. There was no in between. There's no counterfeiting what you had to offer, because this is just barter. Maybe you've heard of it. People exchanging. And that's what they still call the economy. We're still pretending that the economy is based on trade, free trade, exchange. You hear that a lot. Trade, exchange rate, free market, facilitating trade. But the gold has this unique property because when you are very productive back in the days of the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker in your small village, you're the candlestick maker. Let's say you find this new way to create an incredible, huge amount of candles. Should you not produce candles because you cannot get enough goods? You're only one person. How much can you eat? Should you not be producing candles? Because people want candles. Especially if you make a lot of candles, then the price will go down. Maybe that's something you want. You can sell so many candles, you can sell them far and wide. Open up new markets. Maybe that might be good to support the price of the candles. Get those candles shipping everywhere. So maybe that's a question. Maybe you want to ponder that for a little bit. If you are a candle maker back in those days, would you want to produce 1,000 times more candles? Are you going to be putting candle makers out of a job because you can produce so many more candles? The demand for the candles is real. Electricity isn't even invented yet. Maybe when people have those candles, they can study more and get out of the weather, get a nicer environment. That's what civilization is about. Work inside when it's raining, when it's dark, during an eclipse. Have those candles in there, hopefully well ventilated, and figure out electricity. Invent some electricity. Invent the math and the underpinnings for that. The answer is yes, you do want to produce the candles. It's nice because everybody wants the candles, and then you get more. That's good. Okay, the problem is the things that you usually trade the candles for, they're not going to last. The butcher and the baker and the cobbler and the people bringing you their vegetables, you can only handle so much of that stuff. A lot of it goes bad. And what if the cobbler figures out how to make a lot of shoes too? You say, okay, I'm going to stockpile shoes with my candles, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to stockpile shoes necessarily, because that might be like stockpiling. What if someone across from your trade is stockpiling candles and then you make a ton of candles? So if there's a lot of candles and they can't find a market, the price is going to come down because the supply of candles is so high. It's like the supply of air and the supply of rainwater, which nobody back in those days was paying for. So how about a medium of exchange, something between the exchange? This is why we have money. This is why money is necessary. I know everyone has been deranged enough that they hate trade. They even hate gold. They hate exchange. They hate money. And we'll talk about what happened to the money. We're in a condition now, in a condition of the economy. We're in this final stage, not late stage capitalism, but in a late stage of the monetary cycle. Anyway, gold exchange, the medium. It's just called a medium of exchange because you're going to want to exchange things. You're that candle maker. You're still going to want to get something for your production. You're producing a lot of candles. Everyone's happy. But you want something that doesn't go bad. You want something that, like that cobbler or you with your candles, you cannot easily make more of. You want something that is durable, maybe something small, and maybe you want it to be fungible. Maybe you could collect art, but it's hard to pay with a piece of art. And once you trade one piece of art with another piece, there's only one Mona Lisa. There's only so many Van Goghs and even Warhols. So fungible, durable, recognizable, portable, that's gold. So gold is this thing that holds that energy, that negative entropy. Work is negative entropy. The butcher and baker and candlestick maker and the cobbler, they are taking what is chaos and the chaos of things on the ground, and they're making your shoes. That cobbler makes those shoes, and then you're able to reduce the uncertainty and reduce the disorder. If you have a candle going, that's good. The candle has light. The candle keeps the flame going. You can use that flame to boil some water, to turn on the stove, the fireplace, get some heat, have some light, light a torch. So all of these things create more order, which reduces disorder. For all those things I talked about, like a torch going out at night, carrying a torch, scaring away animals, maybe using it as a weapon against any creeps out there on the road, using fire, of course, cooking, real simple elemental stuff, but nobody's explaining this. So maybe this is interesting. And gold is that thing. Why does gold hold this negative entropy, reducing disorder? Entropy is disorder, and then work is that specific narrower and narrower subset, which the economy should be doing all the time and doing more of. Because that's what you want. You want prices to go lower, and you want more services. Don't deny it. If you deny it, I think you can send money on here. Send me some money if you disagree. So that's the only way you would disagree. Okay. But gold, why does gold hold that energy? Don't forget this first and second law and the third law. It's about thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So when you made all those candles, you exerted energy and you created a piece of economic energy with that trade. Is energy the right word? It's definitely reducing uncertainty, creating light in the dark. It's reducing disorder, the disorder of freezing to death because you can't start a fire. Fire's not only going on that candle for light, but it's there to transfer over to another fire you want to start, so you don't have to rub sticks together. But gold is a container because gold is scarce. Like I said, scarce, durable, portable, recognizable, fungible. Maybe I didn't say scarce, but it's scarce because it's very rare that you get supernova stars exploding, creating tension, the kind of stuff that only over the billions of years that Earth has existed from space, the gold that has come to the surface. So that keeps it scarce. We do find about 2% more every year. It gets pulled out of the ground when the prices go high enough. But not only that, we've been in this cycle for 3,000 years since gold was officially made the money, I believe, in Greece or some precursor to Greece. Let me ask the AI. When exactly did gold become the money, and what caused it to become the money? What does that say? Gold, when gold became the money. Oh, this says 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And currencies were backed by gold, formalized in the 19th century. I don't think that's... Yeah, we are doing different things now in this century, for sure, in the 19th and 20th century. There's a tiny bit of a lag with this. This is called the Win System. What's important now? 7-day free trial at winsystem.dev, and link in the description on YouTube. But what's important now, win, W-I-N. So this will tell you things on the spot. You notice I didn't have to type, but there's a tiny bit of a lag. It is transcribing in real time. And if you're talking over the phone with someone, then you get the other person in the conversation. And we'll talk about that a little later. But this is why I think this is a good tool to reduce entropy. Ooh, what about this? Let me think about that. Okay. We'll get back to that later. So it is scarce, just like human labor is scarce. Or finite. Maybe scarce is not the right word. Finite. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much production. We're going to get more production out of the AI. And that's good. You can never have too much production, like we talked about. How well designed can your home and your car be? How fast and how good looking can your car be? How spacious and pleasing and comfortable and good looking can your home be? How good looking can the fuse be? There's no limit. It keeps getting better and better. So believe that. And we'll talk about pessimism here in a moment. But gold, trying to stick on this topic of gold and the work and the gold as the finite store. Remember, it was that medium of exchange. So what happened? Pretty quickly. I'm making more out of it than really it is. And if you try to learn about the Federal Reserve and where money comes from, because we're in this final stage, and you try to listen to them make sense of it, it doesn't make sense until you understand what exchange was, how you have something to offer, and you only want to part with that thing you have to offer if someone else has something to offer. There are other ways that people get other people to do what they want, and that's instead of offering something good, they promise something bad. So when they want something bad to happen to you, they are going to threaten you. How about, you definitely want to pay all taxes. But what if you're living under a dictatorship, a kleptocrat, and the kleptomania of this corrupt government is just taking from you? So you'd rather not do that. You'd rather donate or be in a voluntary system for things that only the government can do. Stuff like police, fire, FAA. And some people say that they can do less, but if we had a voluntary system, I think there's enough money for a voluntary police. I mean, not that you would voluntarily need to comply with the police. I'm really getting off topic here, but this is the root of exchange, and this is why gold is always confiscated, because it gets into a cycle. When there is no government, when there is nobody offering you something you can't refuse, as the mob says, the protection racket, pay up or else, or something bad is going to happen. This is a stick up, give me the loot, give me the money, or else. Voluntary exchange, I don't know, maybe you're a communist and you don't like that and you have all your ideas. I understand why you got to that point, but it's a bit confused because entropy, negative entropy, the person exchanging wants to store that in something so that then that gold as that medium of exchange will hold up better into the future. When they do want to retire, now they're able to take a break because there's so many candles out there, and they can live a more leisurely lifestyle and buy things over time, what are they going to do? They're going to exchange their gold for it. They'll build up a stockpile of gold for their excess production, and then everybody is exchanging gold for their surplus, using gold as their surplus of negative entropy, their surplus of work. This is why Bitcoin is called proof of work, and Bitcoin is finite. Although I like Caspa, but let me try to stay on point, not even go into that topic. But gold, you have a situation where people are using that gold to exchange, which I hope I've established. Then it gets a little dangerous. Those bad people are still out there robbing, stealing, maybe finding out who has the gold, where it is, people who are moving with the gold, getting threatened, getting killed, and that's kind of the history of governments taking it from their people and taking it from other people. Conquest, just to take the gold. And what do you do in that situation? Well, you go to a banker or you go to a government. The government and the banks have these big vaults. They hang on to your gold. They protect it with police and security. And they give you a certificate to redeem the gold. But most people are not redeeming their gold because it's safe to get in there. There's a cost to move it. It's not quite perfect in good increments. You know, you have to pay a fee to store it, and then to remove it, you have to have staff to move it. You have to work that into the fees, the time you're taking up of the staff. Then they have to verify your identity. They have to verify that those certificates are real. The certificates might be counterfeited. We have to investigate the counterfeiting. So maybe there's private investigators and they share that with the police. And then we pay tax to the police. And the cost of this, although this has still been the store hold for thousands of years. But you get into this complication right away when you get the derivative. You're getting off base. Like more information, more disorder, more steps in the process. So it's not perfect money. We're trying to create perfect money with cryptocurrency. It could only be proof of work, though. And let's talk more. Let's talk about what happens next. What do you think happens next? What does that banker do when they notice not as many people are coming back to redeem their gold with that gold certificate? Well, they're going to use the gold. They're not going to keep as much gold. They're going to lend that gold out. They're going to gamble with that gold. They're going to put up something for collateral. They're going to bet in the stock market on leverage. And just as a mathematical certainty, when people get leveraged up, when people borrow and go into debt, then you have more money created. You have literal counterfeiting at that point. And then you reach a stage, and this has happened over and over again, when the coins start out as gold, then they start to dilute the value of that gold in the coin with some copper. Then they are straight up copper or tin, very common elements in the coins. And then there's no gold. Where is the gold? Nobody knows. Corrupt people got paid for not producing anything, and then they keep creating more money, and they come to the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker. Only a few people have that new supply of money before it loses its value, and then they're able to get the gold. And you see this situation now. We went away from the gold standard in 1971. You can go to this website. WTF happened in 1971. A lot of bad things. Everywhere there's an arrow on the chart, and then a bad thing happened. It happened in 1971, okay? That's when we decoupled from the storage of production that the people who voluntarily produced things, energy started leaking out of that system. We know that confiscation is bad. We know that counterfeiting is bad, because it's not fair to the people who produce things. You're leaking energy. The candle maker had a claim on things that the butcher and the baker and the cobbler and the farmer was able to produce because the candle maker produced. The proof was in the work. And then when they had the gold, someone freely and readily exchanged that gold for the candles because of all the use of candles, which I went into. So for someone to get in between, this middleman, and a lot of middlemen came into the scene here in 1971, but when the middlemen come in and the confiscation increases, then you get a situation where the food costs more and more and the housing costs more and more. And people know that they are losing their purchasing power. You have people with these counterfeit dollars. What do they do with the counterfeit dollars to save their purchasing power? They buy houses. They buy apartment buildings with it because they know that you're out there in the real economy working, producing things, trading things, and you need a place to live and you need to eat food. So Bill Gates, with his fortune, his billions of dollars that he doesn't want to lose, he is the largest farm owner in North America, owns the most farmland. As an individual, there's other entities that own more, but they're in the same game. So the price of farmland goes up, the price of housing goes up because people are in this race, and we're in this final stage. What do you think happens? What can we do in this stage? Are we so smart with all of our AI and all of our computers that we have escaped gold? Well, let me pull up a gold chart. Let's talk about what's happening. China bought a huge, tremendous amount of gold. But how far back can we go? It's so hard to find a good gold chart. Let's look at the maximum of this gold chart. So there it is, only since 2005, but it's as high as it's been in dollars ever. I mean, this is going to continue, so we're reaching this final stage. Where do we go? Well, hopefully, as a matter of fact, maybe cryptocurrency and other hard assets. I like Kaspa, Kaspa, but we're going back to gold. And this has happened over and over again, that we go back to the gold, and that is the state of affairs. Before we get into AI and we talk about entropy and how AI can reduce entropy and what you should be doing, why I think something like this is a good tool. But why don't we end it there for now, and I will go on the next topic in my next video. But that's the end when we revert back to the thing that is good at storing energy, and that's the gold, economic energy. I know I was going to say something, but I think that's enough for now. But this app, if you're wondering about what to do, this records your conversation. If you're in sales, marketing, anything from cold calls, known clients, customer service, collaborating on Zoom calls, doing a podcast, and you're doing the, hey, Jamie, pull that up. You don't have a Jamie guy. You can pull it up here. You can put in your prompt here that you need that whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to be, you can put in here. Salesforce integration. If you have Salesforce, we won't cover that. If you know a little bit about AI, there's something called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So not only do you have this model here in the world, probably you've used AI, so you know about a prompt, and that's going to go along. Not only does this use a prompt, which you're used to, but this uses your conversation. Then the prompt will add into this conversation more about what you want to do with the screenshot and the transcript. Okay. And yeah, so your answer will be in here, or you can connect an API. The API is on the website winsystem.dev, and you can look at the API routes and connect this up to other things. Get a long-term transcript library saved, sent off, long-term responses from the AI, and then what you can do with RAG, as I talked about before I distracted myself, is you can load those conversations in here. Not only conversations you've had with people you're collaborating with in your line of work, thing you're aspiring to do or improve on. Maybe you're a tutor, maybe you're being tutored, and you want insights, and you add those specific documents in here. If you've written anything, if you want all your comments on all YouTube videos, I don't know if Google lets you do that, put those in here. You can copy and paste all your conversations you've had with every other AI, create text files out of those, load them in here. Add files button there, load text files in there. Watch out for duplicates, but then press this button, load up a chunk. Chunking, it's called. You don't have to deal with the technical stuff. You don't have to pay a high fee for this. You pay very high fees to get these kind of custom solutions, not only from software, custom software, licensing software like this. License for $29 a month, or for the year is $290, and you get 2 months free for that. But you can really pack this up and load this up. And this, when we'll get to the next chapter of the series, in coming series, we'll talk about more about entropy, that storehold of negative entropy, what you should be doing. A tool like this is what you should be using. Just comparing it to another tool. Have you heard of this cursor thing? Like text cursor? Since ChatGPT came out, the GPT 3.5 model, I'm sure you were aware of what a supernova of intelligence that was, how that really disrupted Google for the first time. Like, Google hasn't had a competitor since the late 90s, and now they do. But these language models, point is, you saw that huge increase. If you saw the GPT-3 or GPT-2 before that, it was like someone talking in their sleep, almost totally incoherent. But now GPT 3.5, you saw that huge leap. We haven't really had that much of an improvement. We've had, depending how technical your use of these AI models are and how much you've used them, you haven't really had too much of an increase in productivity and output or insights. In most areas, it can't write like totally thrilling, blazing, mind-melting novels. Or maybe it can, I don't know. It's not blowing you away for most people and most uses and things that they need. But with programming, it has. GPT 3.5, when that came out, it could write about a paragraph. It could maybe write this small function here. But the AI now, maybe because programming has a good way of training the models, it's better to train and create synthetic data using coding. So this is something they're going to figure out that's going to spread out to other models. And when that new model does get in here for whatever you're doing, I'm going to have it right in here. So consider sticking with me with this product. Check for updates here, and we'll be in this together. And that's going to improve and you'll be right there to ride this wave. But we're going to see, I can't even explain how revolutionary it is that programming has gotten so good. Like 3 years ago, it could barely write something like this and have it come out well. Now it's building entire apps. Look at all these files. You can tell the app in here, this is a text editor, you can tell it anything and it can get a very deep and broad understanding of this entire code base for this program. So whether you're a coder or not, now understand where we're going with this AI thing. Like this is, it can do 1,000-line file here, 1,000-line file here, 1,000-line file here, and understand the relationship between all of these. And this is just the beginning. Like this thing just came online really a year ago, 2 or 3 years ago. This was unusable with most code. Now we've really gone a higher layer of abstraction. Like, so the amount of things, the amount of areas where you should be reducing entropy in new ways, increasing certainty in new ways, increasing order in new ways. And order is not just doing the thing that you're supposed to do to reduce entropy, like order and disorder and reducing uncertainty. The problem is you can fall into being reductive. It's called reductive is a good word. So even order and certainty is not quite it, because when we talk about ordering things, it's best just to say to reduce the entropy, because order has a connotation that we're doing something we already know how to do. But to get the asymptote closer to the limit, you have to do both. You have to do exploring and doing what you already know how to do. And really you have to explore and then do a kind of a sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears, chasing down a possibility that you don't know will work, and then going with the best one. So you have to sacrifice in order to get the asymptote of negative entropy closer to the limit. The smaller and smaller number of possible states, of possible configurations, which make it better and better. And maybe that's it for now. So this is going to be the theme going forward. The point, the reason I'm making this, putting this out there, haven't seen it, hopefully taking the temperature down of this disorder. But we'll talk about the media, we'll talk about the government. The fake promise of both is that they know what is going on everywhere all of the time. They are the experts. They have the power. They have the expertise and the degrees and the influence and the money. That's why they're the experts, because they know what's going on everywhere all the time and what you should pay attention to and where that tax money should go to. And that's false, because they don't know what's happening everywhere all the time and they don't know what's relevant. And they're not the experts. But it's kind of a parody of themselves, and they like being a parody of themselves. They like to draw you in with their nonsense and just keep you paying attention, and then they ping pong off each other. People in the media go into government, and people from the government go undercover in the media and pretend they're not working for the government. But becoming galaxy brained and increasing the information, that's just disorder, that's just entropy. So the point is not to increase entropy. The point is not to increase disorder unless you're in a self-defense situation. Nobody looks good making someone else just look bad when they don't deserve it. And maybe even when they do deserve it, it's not a good look. And even though that feels good maybe for you when you're doing it, it's not something you should be doing. You tend to get burned out eventually, and with good reason, because humans are a specific, what should I say, organism with specific responsibilities to reduce entropy. And we're the happiest when we reduce entropy. But I'm going to leave it there for now. And I will see you in part 2. And maybe I'll have some subscribers next time. So thank you for watching.